Hey, you're back. Welcome to another episode of U.S. History with Mr. Peterson. I'm excited to get into... Oh, my coffee finished. Nice. Let's get on this coffee. I'll be right back. All right, can't be a history teacher without some coffee, right? All right, I'm gonna finish this. We'll get that video going. Okay, my coffee's done, so we can get into the lesson. And that's actually a thing I say in my history classes on a daily basis. So in our last episode, we talked about the New England colonies, the founding of Plymouth and Massachusetts Bay, eventually morphing into Massachusetts. We talked about the founding of Rhode Island by Roger Williams. And then you also have the founding of Connecticut by Thomas Hooker and some of the other Puritans there. And then we talked about how New Hampshire broke off away from the Massachusetts Bay as well. Well, today we're going to be getting into a new group of colonies, and they're called the Middle Colonies. But the Middle Colonies were not always owned by the English. In fact, those colonies were started by some other countries. Some key things that you'll see here in today's lesson is that you'll see colonies that were founded by other countries, not for religious reasons. So far, the colonies we've looked at in English North America have all been founded for religious reasons. People breaking away, people wanting to have more religious freedom. The colonies that we'll look at here in the Middle Colonies were begun for economic reasons. That's right, during this time in world history, the way that nations measured their wealth was through the amount of raw materials and the amount of gold and silver that the nation could claim. For that reason, it was an arms race to get as much as possible. So what these European governments were doing all over the world was establishing colonies and then looking in those colonies for more resources like gold and silver and other things that would make that country more valuable. And this is what's known as the mercantile system, or mercantilism. And it has a huge impact on the Middle Colonies. Let's get into them. Here we go. So far in our lessons, we've really only been focusing on three nations when it comes to the settlement of North America. We looked at Spain and all the exploration that they did with the conquistadors. We looked at France and all of the exploration that took place in what is now modern-day Canada and the Great Lakes region by the trappers and traders and explorers that came over representing France. And then, of course, we looked at England and all the claims and colonies that are being founded along the eastern coast of what is now the United States. But one nation we really haven't talked about too much, and they were fairly involved in the age of exploration, all right, is the nation of the Netherlands, or Holland, or the Dutch. All right, all of those are referring to the same place. The Dutch had invested a lot of time and money into the age of exploration, and several of their claims in the New World were based off the findings of an Englishman who sailed for the English but then also for the Netherlands, claiming different spots for both countries. His name was Henry Hudson, and Henry Hudson explored all the way up north into Canada. Hudson Bay is named after him. All right, but another key spot in North America, especially along the East Coast, was the spot that he had also explored near what is called today the Hudson River, also named for Henry Hudson. Along the Hudson River, the Dutch began to make several different key colonies, and these key colonies were very well placed. They was part of the Dutch mercantile system. They were looking to find valuable resources to send back to the Netherlands in order to strengthen the Netherlands' international and global influence. The claims of Henry Hudson and all of the exploration that he did here along the eastern coast of North America eventually began to be settled as what was then called New Netherland. Today, we know the same spot as New York. So let's go ahead and look at how New Netherland became New York. Due to their mercantile and economic approach to settling the New World, the Dutch went about this process very efficiently and pretty successfully for a little while. In 1624, Dutch settlement began when different groups came across the Atlantic Ocean from Europe, and they settled in two distinct sites. One on the modern-day island of Manhattan in New York City that they purchased from the Indians there, and another settlement further up the river at what was then called Fort Orange near present-day Albany, New York. So the Dutch were heavily involved in what is now New York. They also used an interesting system in order to entice settlers and reward those that recruited them. The Dutch instituted what is known as the patroon system. A patroon was basically a land grant from the Dutch government in the New World to anyone that brought 50 settlers with them. And this was a large piece of land. We're talking square miles of land here. For 50 or more people in a patroon to go ahead and settle and colonize. Anyone who couldn't bring 50 people with them would get a decent sized amount of land that they could farm individually. And so this is how the Dutch enticed people into the New World. The age-old guarantee to the middle class of Europe. land ownership. Now, the Dutch that settled here were also Christians. They were Protestant Christians, but they were part of the Dutch Reformed Church, which was different than the Puritans. If you remember, the Puritans wanted to purify the Church of England. This group from the Dutch Reformed Church allowed immense religious freedom in their colonies. So New Netherland at that time became a haven for different persecuted religious groups. The founding governor of the Manhattan Island settlement by the Dutch, which later became known as New Amsterdam, was a man by the name of Peter Minuit, and he led the colony into great success for the first few years. Over time, Dutch settlers poured into New Amsterdam and into New Netherland as the Dutch settlement proved to be a profitable and pleasant place to live. Eventually, though, things went south for the Dutch. Remember, one of the main reasons why they settled these places was for economic prosperity for the Netherlands and for the financial groups that supported them back in the Netherlands. So the first few years that they started turning in a poor harvest and not turning as big of a profit as they had hoped, they started to feel the economic pressure. The governor at that time was a man by the name of Peter Stuyvesant. Stuyvesant kind of gets a bum rap in history as the guy who let New Netherlands and New Amsterdam settlements down. As the profitability decreased, pretty soon the Dutch started pouring less and less resources into their New World colonies. They turned into really a rundown and neglected place to live. It was being held together simply by the people who were living there. Fast forward to the mid-1660s, and we have another problem for New Netherland. The English remember, they didn't really forget. Basically what happens here is you have the English king who wants to give his brother, then known as the Duke of York, a gift. So what does he do? He gives the most inexpensive thing the king can give. He gives him land in the New World. He's never seen it. He doesn't, sure, take it, man. All right, so he gives his brother, the Duke of York, a proprietary piece of land here in the New World. And so his brother decides, well, I'm going to settle this land. Well, come to find out, it's the exact same spot where the Dutch have been. All right, it's the exact same spot of New Netherlands and the New Amsterdam colonies. But if you remember, all the way back in 1497, John Cabot, shout out to the video about early English exploration. If you remember back to 1497, John Cabot had claimed the entire eastern seaboard for England. So the English now have a proprietary claim on a piece of land where the Dutch were settled. So what do the English do? Well, basically what a bully would do. They show up in New Amsterdam Harbor, well, I guess like New York Harbor. I don't really know what we call it at that point. They show up in New York Harbor with a fleet of ships behind them, basically kind of strong-arming the Dutch into giving over their colony. Well, at this point, the Dutch settlers and colonists were pretty dissatisfied with the support they had from the Dutch government. Peter Stuyvesant was not doing himself any favors with the way he was leading the colony, and so really they just kind of said, yeah, England, sure, why not? Come on in, you can be in charge. So basically what we have here is the Dutch colony of New Amsterdam peacefully passing into the hands of the English, who rename it New York, after the Duke of York, of course. And New York is born. Well, the Duke of York must have been pretty excited with his gift of land here in the New World. He has his new colony in New York, so what does he do? He decides to re-gift it. Because yeah, that's always a good, because re-gifting shows that you really care about somebody. And what does he do? Well, he gives part of the New York colony, or a part of his proprietary claim in the New World, from his brother the king, and he gives it to two of his friends. Those friends are Sir George Carteret and Lord John Berkeley. So now these two guys got their own proprietary colony as well. So what do? So in order to entice people to come to their new colony, Carteret and Berkeley decide that land is going to be cheap. If you show up, you're going to get a bunch, and that's what people want to hear in England. And they also grant full religious freedom. That's a big step for an English colony, to have full religious freedom. And the third thing is that they were also allowed some self-government. So really, you could leave England. It's like a total country change. You could leave England, go to the New World. You're going to get land that you've never had before in your life. You're going to be able to govern yourself. All right, you're also going to have full religious freedom outside of the Anglican Church. It was a win-win-win for anyone wanting to come to the New World, and thus New Jersey is born. So now we have two middle colonies in control of the English, New York and now New Jersey. Both proprietary colonies. Now we're going to look at a third proprietary colony, and that is the colony of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was founded because Charles II was in debt to a friend. That's right. He owed money to someone, and that someone died, and so he still owed that money to that someone's kid. So instead of paying money to the son of the friend that he owed money to, the king gives him the easiest gift that he can give. That's right, land in the New World. It's like buying acreage on the moon or giving someone a star. He's never going to see it. It's no skin off his back. Here you go, guy. Here's some land in the New World. It's yours. You can settle it however you want. Who was that guy, you ask? His name was William Penn. also known as the Quaker Oat Oatmeal Dude. Why is he the Quaker Oat Oatmeal Dude? Well, because William Penn was part of a religious group that was in England known as the Quakers. The Quakers had some different religious beliefs. Some of them were great, others of them were a little sketchy biblically. Either way, the Anglican Church did not like them, and they were obviously a persecuted group. So William Penn decides that he is going to establish a colony for his Quaker brethren to go to the New World and live with religious freedom. Penn called his colony a holy experiment, and it became known as Pennsylvania. Sylvania is Latin for wood, so literally Penn's woods. And if you've been to Pennsylvania, you know there's lots of woods there, so it makes sense. And the colony of Pennsylvania is born. Why do I keep saying that? Like, I didn't come into this video wanting to say that every time. That's a weird thing to say. Anyways, Pennsylvania got started. Again, these proprietary colonies end up offering more religious freedom than the colonies started by religious groups. It's kind of ironic that way, but this was a place where religious freedom was accepted and lots of commerce ended up picking up as well. Eventually, Pennsylvania would be home to the largest city in all of the British colonies and the largest city outside of London in the British Empire, and that city was Philadelphia. Another group that began to settle here in Pennsylvania was a group of Germans that were also escaping religious persecution in their home country. And so you have lots of Germans coming into the New World, settling in English lands as well. Okay, so that's 3 middle colonies: New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. All of them are proprietary colonies, all of them offering practically full religious freedom. Now, we're moving on to our final middle colony of the day, and that's Delaware. Delaware was actually included in Penn's woods, and it was part of the English, although it had passed hands from the Dutch after being originally settled by the Swedish. The Swedish settled it for some time. They established what is now Wilmington, Delaware. Back then it was Fort Christina, named for the Queen of Sweden. And eventually it moved on to the Dutch, and the British came in and muscled New York away from the Dutch. They also got Delaware as well. And so basically Delaware was kind of like under the operation of Pennsylvania all the way up until 1776, but it was there, and we want to make sure we talk about it. So here we are. We've covered the New England and the Middle Colonies. Hopefully you can see the difference between the two. Religious purposes are a key reason why many English settlers are coming to the New World, and these Middle Colonies offer full religious freedom. And this is where you start to see that religious diversity that's really going to flourish in America for the next few hundred years. All right, it brings us to the nation that we are today. So as always, thanks for hanging out with us today. I'm kind of embarrassed because this is like video number 16, 17, I think, on my channel, and so far I have 1 like. Will you be like number 2? Yeah, you. Just do it right there. Just like the video. You can do it. Hey, might as well subscribe. Go for it. Actually, the subscribe button's like way down there right now because I'm the little guy up at the top of the screen.